Picture two people, same city, same general income bracket, both working reasonable jobs, living reasonable lives. 5 years from now, one of them is going to look back and wonder where the time went. The other one is going to have built something, quietly, without going viral, without a lucky break, without inheriting anything, just a different set of decisions, made early enough to matter. That gap between those two people? It's not intelligence. It's not work ethic. It's almost never talent. Most of the time, it comes down to one thing: understanding what actually moves the needle and being willing to be boring enough to do it consistently. But before we get into the mechanics of it, there's something worth saying first. The financial content most people consume is designed to sell them something. Either it's selling urgency, trade this, flip that, crypto is going to the moon, or it's selling patience as a substitute for strategy. Just put money in a 401k and wait 40 years. Neither one of those is actually a wealth-building plan. One is a casino dressed up in financial terminology. The other is a slow drift toward a retirement that was never quite designed by you. 5 years sits in an interesting place. It's long enough for real compounding to start working. Long enough to develop income, discipline, and actual assets. But short enough that the decisions you make right now, this year, this quarter, are still the ones that determine everything. 5 years is a window, and most people let it close without realizing they were standing in front of it. So, what actually works? The first thing nobody wants to hear. Here's what the savings-focused crowd gets wrong. Frugality is a defense. It protects you. It keeps you from losing ground. But defense doesn't win games, and it doesn't build wealth. At least not at any pace that changes your life in 5 years. Run the math yourself. If you're saving $400 a month, which puts you ahead of roughly half of American households, you're adding $4,800 a year. Invested at historical market averages, you'd have somewhere around $28,000 to $32,000 at the 5-year mark. That's not nothing, but it's not a turning point either. It's a foundation, barely poured. The lifestyle expands to absorb it. Not because people are reckless, not because they're spending irrationally, but because the social architecture of modern American life is built to capture rising income. Better neighborhood, better car to fit the neighborhood, better restaurants, because your friends at the new job go to better restaurants. Each upgrade feels earned. Each one is individually reasonable. But collectively, they form a wall that keeps your savings rate essentially flat even as your income climbs. Behavioral economists have a name for the psychological mechanism driving this: hedonic adaptation. The brain is wired to normalize improvements rapidly. The new apartment feels extraordinary for about 60 days. Then it's just where you live. The elevated social circle becomes the baseline, and suddenly the previous version of your life feels like deprivation, rather than the perfectly functional reality it actually was. The people who build real wealth in 5 years have almost all figured out some version of the same trick. They decouple their savings behavior from their income behavior. The mechanism doesn't have to be complicated. Some people automate transfers before they ever see the money. Some people use a simple rule. Every income increase gets split, half into lifestyle, half into savings or investments. The specifics matter less than the principle. You have to architect a system that captures the raise before your identity catches up to it. Where the money actually goes. Assume you've done the hard part. Income is growing. Lifestyle inflation is under control. You have actual dollars moving into savings consistently. Now what? This is where a lot of people make an interesting mistake. They get sophisticated at exactly the wrong time. They start researching individual stocks, option strategies, sector rotation, real estate syndications. All of these things have a place, eventually. But in the early years of building wealth, the research time spent chasing complexity almost always underperforms the boring alternative. The boring alternative, broad market index exposure, added to consistently, regardless of what the market is doing that month. This isn't exciting advice. It's not the kind of content that gets shared because someone felt like they discovered something. But the performance data over the last 100 years is pretty unambiguous. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annually across a century that included wars, crashes, recessions, and every imaginable form of financial panic. Not every year, not every decade individually, but across time, the drift has been upward. And the investor who bought boring, broad market exposure consistently almost always outperformed the one who was trying to be clever. A quick example to make this concrete. If someone takes that income growth seriously, controls lifestyle inflation, and ends up investing $1,000 a month consistently for 5 years, that's $60,000 of capital deployed. At moderate growth, that position is worth somewhere north of $70,000 by year 5. Not spectacular on its own, but here's what that number doesn't capture. The investor who has been doing this for 5 years has also built something harder to quantify. They've built the habit, the discipline, and the psychological durability to keep going when markets drop. That last part is what almost everyone underestimates. Most wealth in the market isn't lost to bad strategy. It's lost to good strategy abandoned under pressure. The part that changes everything. Here's the thing about 5 years that most financial content never talks about. The end of the 5 years isn't the payoff. The end of the 5 years is the launch. Compounding has a shape. In the early years, it's nearly flat. You're putting money in, the returns are real, but they don't feel dramatic. The transformation feels slow. And this is the phase where most people give up. Not because the strategy is wrong, but because the feedback loop is long and the culture around them is selling short ones. But somewhere around years 5 through 7, the math starts to accelerate visibly. A portfolio that took you 5 years to build to $80,000 doesn't take another 5 years to double, because now the existing capital is doing real work alongside your contributions. The gap between what you put in and what the total is worth starts to widen. And that widening is what people usually mean when they talk about their investments working for them. There's a story in this. A man in his mid-20s, working a job he didn't love, income that covered his life, but didn't obviously build it. He made a decision, not to get rich exactly, but to run a 5-year experiment. He would genuinely try to grow his income. He would be ruthless about not inflating his lifestyle, and he would invest every dollar he could. Put away into the most boring vehicle he could find and not touch it. 5 years later, he had around $85,000 invested. His income had gone from $52,000 to just over $90,000. Not a millionaire story, not a viral moment. But he had crossed a threshold that most people never cross in their entire working lives. The point where the money he had saved was generating meaningful returns on its own, independently of whether he had a good month or a bad one. He had built a second, quieter engine, and that engine was only going to grow. What this actually requires of you, it requires you to make peace with being unimpressive for a while. In a culture obsessed with financial aesthetics, the right apartment, the right car, the visible markers of having arrived, quietly building wealth looks a lot like staying still. People around you are upgrading. Your social media feed is full of financial highlight reels, and you're in a 3-year-old car, living in a perfectly fine but not glamorous apartment, automating transfers to accounts you barely look at. This is the psychological challenge that nobody's building course teaches, because it can't be taught in a framework. It has to be felt. You have to get genuinely comfortable with the idea that the most financially productive thing you can do right now might not look like anything from the outside. Silent wealth is built silently. That's not an accident. It's the whole design. If you want to build real financial momentum in the next 5 years, the roadmap is shorter than most people expect and harder than most people are willing to accept. Treat your income as something you're building, not something that's happening to you. Invest in your earning capacity the same way you'd invest in any other asset. Deliberately, consistently, with a long enough time horizon to see the results. Every raise, every promotion, every new skill is a return on that investment. Build a wall between income growth and lifestyle growth. Not forever, not as a form of deprivation, but long enough to let savings accumulate at a pace that actually changes your numbers. Half of every raise into the future. It's a simple rule. It's brutally effective. Put your savings somewhere boring and leave it there. Broad market, low fees, consistent contributions. Don't be clever. Don't try to time anything. Show up every month like it's a utility bill, and then stay in it for the full 5 years. Not 4, not 3.5, 5, because the compounding effect that makes this whole thing worth doing is a reward for patience, and it doesn't pay early. 5 years from right now is going to arrive. There's no version of this where it doesn't. The only question you're actually answering with your decisions this year is, what do you want to be standing on when it gets here? A different financial position is available to you. It doesn't require luck. It doesn't require a breakthrough. It requires a better strategy, applied consistently for long enough to work. That's it. That's the whole thing. If this reframed how you think about the next 5 years, drop a comment below. Where do you want your finances to be when that window closes? Because the answer to that question is worth thinking about, and the time to start thinking about it is right now.